Christians in 1942?
It's okay to distribute.
Commercial speech is
In
not
public
protected.
thoroughfares, it's not.
Not protected.
Not
It said that while handing out leaflets on a public street seems to be the ideal way to express yourself. So the case wasn't about political speech or expressive speech. So they couldn't rule, they couldn't set a precedent for that. But what they said was, it makes sense to us that if you're going to express yourself through handing out leaflets, a public street is an ideal setting. However, it doesn't extend to commercial speech, purely commercial speech. Sure. It says that the public street is an ideal place to hand out pamphlets that would express ideas, just as the man did who bought the submarine and wanted, yeah. However, they said that because that was strictly a commercial use, that it was not protected by the First Amendment. Okay, then we had, back to the evolution of this, New York Times v. Sullivan, 1964, which from your quiz today did what?
Political advertising.
Political advertising, not speech. Political speech in the form of advertising is protected by the First Amendment. Okay? Wow, that really was.
That is pretty good.
Yeah, I would totally do that. Joke, is that what you said?
Joke! I didn't know you could just buy that.
Did they auction it?
How do you?
I think you've been to a military surplus. You can get anything.
I wasn't. You can just buy a tank then?
Peter Griffin got a tank. Yeah, he did. Okay. Okay, let me tell you, I don't care that you know the details of the case, but these are it is interesting. 1971, this happened, and so it gets to the Supreme Court 4 years later. But in 1971, a small paper in Virginia published an ad. Now, it wasn't their ad, but they accepted an ad and published it from the Women's Pavilion of New York City. And what the Women's Pavilion of New York City does is to help women make arrangements for abortions in New York. This is 1971. Abortions are illegal in almost every state in the Union. It's 2 years later, in '73, that Roe v. Wade was passed. So this was basically a women's center advertising out of state to help women who need an abortion get to New York City and Bigelow was charged with violating a state statute that forbade any person by publication, lecture, advertisement, or by the sale or circulation of any publication or in any other manner an encouragement of abortion. So there was a Virginia state law that said you may not in any way, through your expression, your speech, and advertisement, pretty much in any way, you may not try to assist women obtain an abortion.
May not assist.
A woman in getting an abortion, even giving information about how to do it.
So that would be like, I mean, at that time it was an illegal act. So that'd be like now if I tried to say, come to my house to buy drugs, it's the same type of concept in that time.
Right.
Okay, so it was just an illegal advertisement.
It was illegal. But there was an additional, in addition to abortion being illegal in Virginia, there was a law on the books in Virginia that said that anything that would assist a woman in getting an abortion, such as an offer of information, or how to do it, how to go about getting a safe abortion, was illegal.
Is that just in Virginia on that one?
This was just Virginia, but it went all the way, but almost every state had similar things. New York did not at the time, and that's why his organization, the Women's Pavilion in New York, was advertising. The legal precedent that came out of Bigelow v. Virginia, in the '72 decision, the Supreme Court overturned Bigelow's conviction. And this is what they said. The existence of commercial activity in itself is not justification for narrowing protection merely because it appears as a commercial advertisement. I will repeat. The existence of commercial activity in itself is not justification for narrowing the protection merely because, and they're talking about First Amendment protection there, merely because it appears as a commercial advertisement. Okay. The existence of commercial activity in itself is not justification for narrowing the protection merely because it appears as a commercial advertisement.
Can you put that in like layman's terms, like outside?
Just because speech has a commercial aspect to it, such as them saying, come for a fee, we will help you find a legal abortion.
Okay.
Just because it has that commercial element to it does not necessarily mean it's not covered by the First Amendment,
Okay.
which is different than anything that we've seen before.
Okay.
So does that like overrule their like the law?
Yes,
So
yes,
that
it,
makes it all invalid?
it invalidates the Virginia statute. Yes, it does. Brandon?
Did you say just because speech has a commercial element to it does not necessarily mean it is protected by the First Amendment?
Does not mean that it's not protected
Not protected.
by the First Amendment. So remember, everything up until, didn't even consider advertising to be having any kind of First Amendment protection up until 1942. Then the court did this kind of weird thing and saying, well, public streets are a good place for expression, but not for commercial activity. Then we get to the New York Times v. Sullivan, and they're saying that if it is political speech in the form of an ad, it has First Amendment protection. Then we get to Bigelow v. Virginia in '75, and they're saying, well, just because something has a commercial element to it, you're trying to sell a service or sell a product, that does not necessarily mean that it should lose First Amendment protection. So this is the first case where we're actually seeing, outside of political ads, we're seeing commercial speech being provided First Amendment protection. First time in American history, 1975.
Were there a lot of the same justices from like the 60s on that?
Quite a few still remain, the 70s.
Because it seems like so different.
Well, there would have been a lot of continuity here. There would not have been here. They're really not that different.
I guess I was thinking about Valentine.
Yeah, that's the one that's quite different. Although, it's important because of what?
That was the first time they considered that.
First time they ever even considered advertising as having any kind of First Amendment claim. Okay.
Is it vague though? It seems vague to me, Bigelow.
It's still vague. It's still totally
Because
vague.
it says, it's saying that, does that mean all commercial stuff need
No.
protected, or is it a case
Nope.
by case situation?
It'd be case by case. All it's saying is that if it has a commercial, just because it has a commercial use, does not exempt it from First Amendment. And that's what courts had always done. You're trying to sell bottled water? I'm sorry, Brandon. That has no First Amendment protection whatsoever. You can't speak about that in class. And now it'd be just that, the very nature that that is commercial does not exclude it automatically from having First Amendment protection. Okay. Public Service Commission. Central Hudson versus Public Service Commission of New York, 1980. Central Hudson versus Public Service. I didn't add my C here. Shocked that you didn't follow it. Service Commission of New York, 1980. There are a number of cases that followed Bigelow and Central Hudson that led to the creation of what will be the last thing I talk about today, and that is the commercial speech doctrine, which is the current standard. This is, though, the cases involved in the evolution that I want you to know. This is the real corpus of Supreme Court precedent on the protection of advertising by the First Amendment. So, in this particular case, the state of New York banned, their service commission banned Central Hudson. Central Hudson is the power company, or was the power company. And they were advertising, use our power. What historically was happening in these periods, in the few years just before this ruling? Pardon me? Not the hippies. Lord, I had already hung up my tie-dye by this time.
Economic crisis?
There was an economic crisis and there was also an energy crisis. Those of you will not imagine what it was like when I was trying to cruise around looking cool in high school in my Plymouth Fury, yellow Plymouth Fury, cruising the streets of Houston trying to look cool, and you couldn't get gasoline anywhere. People would line up for miles, and then they would ration it. You could only get it on every other day, depending upon your license plate. What was happening was the OPEC nations in the Middle East put a squeeze on the oil. So we had an oil crisis in the early 70s and another one in the late 70s. So the New York State, the Public Service Commission said, wait a minute, we don't want people to use, we want people to do what? Conserve energy. And these ads at Central Hudson, they weren't coming out and just saying, use us, use us, use us, but they weren't saying conserve either. And they said, we're gonna ban them. We're gonna ban you doing that. On the grounds that advertising promotes the use of electricity and is contrary to the national policy of conserving energy. And just 2 years prior to this ruling, President Carter famously turned down the temperature in the White House and appeared in a sweater in all of his addresses to the nation. And he told people at their homes they should do the same thing. Put on more clothes. It was not a sexy time in America. Put on more clothes and turn down the thermostat. Or turn up the thermostat or whatever you want. Okay, negative. Okay. The Supreme Court ruled that this ban was an infringement on the First Amendment rights of the utility company. This is purely commercial speech. Purely commercial speech. So what have we seen before? Commercial speech doesn't get any First Amendment protection. Only if it's in the form of a political ad. The fact that it's commercial doesn't necessarily preclude it from getting First Amendment protection. You are violating Central Hudson's First Amendment rights by banning this ad. That's a major, major change in the evolution. Yeah. Okay. No First Amendment protection. First time that we'd ever considered it, and the court said there's no First Amendment protection for commercial speech. There is in New York Times v. Sullivan, but only for political advertisements. Bigelow v. Virginia. Just because something has a commercial aspect to it doesn't mean that it necessarily loses its First Amendment protection. Advertising has First Amendment protection.
You said doesn't, so the Bigelow one doesn't lose First Amendment protection?
Just because it happens to be commercial in nature. Okay. Now, while they overturned this and ruled in Central Hudson's favor, and for the first time set the precedent that advertising has First Amendment protection, they did give a caveat. And they said that while commercial speech advertising has First Amendment protection, it does not have as great of First Amendment protection as political or ideological speech. It has it, it automatically has it, but we can find exemptions for banning, allowing the banning of commercial speech easier than banning political speech.
So banning commercial speech is not as egregious as other types.
Sure, you can say it that way. Yes, sir.
So advertising does have First Amendment protection, but we can find exemptions.
Yes, more easily than we can for banning political speech. Remember that whole first section, public order, that you all voted you wanted to keep on for the hypotheticals? Talked about how far the government can go legally, and they have a very high burden when it comes to your political speech. So they're saying the same thing here. Yes, advertising has First Amendment protection, but not as much or as absolute as political speech or ideological speech. Okay. You got that as the evolution? I guess I have one more quick thing to do, and I do have it for 5 minutes. I think I can handle it. Okay. Okay. You're gonna love me for this. A 4-part test came out of Central Hudson that I'm not gonna make you responsible for.
Wow.
And amazing? And I love the multiple part test, I really do. The reason is because what eventually came out of a bunch of cases is what's called the commercial speech doctrine, which is basically the same thing as a Central Hudson. It's just more condensed. There are only, how many parts do they have in here? There are only 3 parts to it. That's it. So, what came out of all of this is what we call the commercial speech doctrine. And this is highlighted in a little book, in a little part of page 571 in your book, the shaded part. Okay. It states the First Amendment does not protect either false or misleading ads or ads for unlawful goods or services. That's period. And we already found out. We were talking about things that were types of speech that felt outside or external to First Amendment protection. So, just right off the bat, if it is false or misleading, or if it's advertising an illegal service or product, it does not have First Amendment protection. This is where Central Hudson comes into play, because what are they saying here? Just because something may be false, if it's political speech, it would still be protected, right? This is really what came out of Central Hudson. Because Central Hudson said it's protected, but not to the extent of political speech or ideological speech. I could stand up here and lie to you about things, and I would have a fairly strong First Amendment protection. But if I'm trying to sell you something, and it's false, misleading, or illegal, there's no First Amendment protection. Okay? Then they devised this 3-part test. A.
We need those.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Do you realize how much air I'm expending to tell you this? Government may regulate truthful advertising for legal goods and services if the following conditions are met. So, no First Amendment protection.
I thought that was it.
No First Amendment protection whatsoever for false or misleading ads or for ads for illegal and unlawful products or services. I haven't gotten to A yet. Well, I did, and then I kind of backed up.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, now, government may regulate advertising for legal products that's truthful if the following conditions are met. A, there is a substantial state interest to justify the regulation. There is a substantial state interest to justify the regulation. That is a very high bar set by the court. The government would have to show. Similar to what? What might be that high bar?
Public security, or like national security.
National security, public safety? Okay, that's A. B, there is evidence that the regulation directly advances this interest. So A, there is a compelling national interest, substantial. They call state interest meaning government interest. B, there is evidence that the regulation would directly advance that interest. And C, there is a reasonable fit between the state interest and the government regulation. So basically what they're saying here is it can't be overly broad. Remember we saw that in obscenity tests as well. There needs to be a good fit between the interest of the substantial interest of the state, of the government, and the First Amendment rights. Okay? Hold on to all of this knowledge, because this, as well as what we go over Tuesday, will be on Thursday's quiz. Have a good weekend, everyone.